stage. Okay, Tristan, we gotta do the selfie. I told them all this is a thing now. All right, thank you.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? All right. Woo! I'm so glad to be here. I had the most insane trip coming here. There was 6 times yesterday with all the insanity around COVID and flying right now that I thought I wouldn't be able to make it. So I'm so glad to be here. And this morning, I found out that people from North Dakota are just as friendly as they say. I walk out of where I was staying, and the first thing that happened to me on the street is someone complimented me on my shoes. I said, yeah, all right, that's a great way to start the day. So where is my clicker? In 1987, Oklahoma City hit economic rock bottom. It was one of the worst performing in the country. Places were closing left and right. And they elected a new mayor, Ron Norick, who's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He saw his responsibility as mayor, beyond anything, was to bring jobs to the city, whatever it took. So they heard that United wanted to build a new airplane maintenance facility, a new place to fix up their airplanes. And him and his council, they decided they were going to do whatever it took to bring that maintenance facility to Oklahoma. So they offered tax incentives, breaks, they offered grants and subsidies. They actually got the residents of Oklahoma City to vote to pass a new sales tax for 3 years. They would make everything in the city more expensive to actually pay for the new maintenance facility. So United would get a brand spanking new maintenance facility for absolutely free if they would go to this city. And then United put the facility in a different city. They didn't go here. And Ron Norick, the mayor, he said, what went wrong? He called up the executives and asked, why didn't you pick us? We would have offered you all the money in the world. And what the executive told him was that they sent 2 middle managers to the city to check it out. And they reported back one single sentence that killed the deal. That sentence was, we couldn't imagine living there. And that is when Ron Norick realized that we no longer live in an economy where you create jobs in a city and people come to the jobs. More and more, the economy we have is one where young, talented people move to the cities where they want to live, and the jobs come to them. So he turned around his approach. He realized that he needed to make Oklahoma City the kind of place that people would bring their companies to chase the young, talented people who wanted to live there. And he is absolutely right to do so. In the last number of years, Smart Growth have found that 500 companies in America have moved their headquarters to be in places that are more walkable, more bikeable, that have better transit. Multiple studies have found that young people are looking for the kinds of places where homes and businesses feel walkable, that they have this interaction with the street, they're lively places, and less so the strip malls that we've built for so long. And 3/4 of millennials want to live in this kind of vibrant mixed-use community. Now, this is a key point. Not everybody wants to live downtown. But if you're living in suburbs or a rural town, they do want to be able to walk to a local cafe. They want to be able to walk to a local pub to see friends. They want that kind of mixed-use environment. So Ron Norick's new economic strategy was to reinvest in their public spaces. They took their creek that had actually dried up and they brought water back to it. They invested in sidewalks and in bike lanes and in transit and in festivals like this one, and they turned the city around, and it is doing much more successful today. Now, Oklahoma City, that's a big city, but the same is true for smaller, rural, and suburban communities like so many in North Dakota. So this is Lancaster in California, a rural town that in the early 2000s, was also facing really hard economic straits. So they decided to reinvest in making it the kind of place where people would really want to live. And I want you to tell me, just guess, whether they were successful in driving economic growth based on what their city looked like. So what do you think? Did it work? Absolutely. It's actually amazing, the impact. 49 new businesses right away. The property tax, their property assessment jumped by 10%. And I love this stat. 800 people actually reinvested in refurbishing their homes after this because they had renewed faith in the future of their community. And isn't it visceral? When you look at it, you know this is more of a place where you'd want to spend time. And if you want to create a place that drives business growth, that attracts and keeps new employees, there is one job we have to get right. We have to create wonderful places, places that people love. I mean, we got to design these communities for one animal, and that is the human animal. We got to take seriously our needs and the kind of place we're looking for. So that's what our company does. We're called Happy City. We were started after our founder, Charles Montgomery, wrote this book, Happy City, about how to design communities to support the well-being, to meet the needs of the human mind. So we help developers and cities around the world meet those needs, support healthy places. And we plumb the depths of public health and psychology and neuroscience and behavioral economics, sociology, and other disciplines to create a recipe of urban happiness. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you 5 lessons, 5 practical insights on how to do what Lancaster did, how to do what Oklahoma City did, and to maximize the economic potential of main streets in North Dakota to attract people. So the first thing that we need to understand before I can give you these 5 lessons is when we're talking about a vibrant, walkable place, what is the kind of place that we're talking about? What is the basic logic? So just going through the essential logic here. A community, of course, starts with homes. People walk back and forth to the homes, creating street life, which attracts businesses to serve the needs of those people walking on the street. Businesses then make homes more valuable, right? Because you have more amenities near homes and more jobs. And then you have more, so people build more homes, which creates more street life, which then drives more businesses, which then attracts more homes. So when we're trying to create vibrant places, the kind of job we're doing is creating and then cultivating this kind of self-reinforcing process, so that over decades, this can grow in complexity and depth and become these places that just feel so vibrant and wonderful. The challenge, though, is sometimes to get this started. So this is a problem that Surrey, British Columbia, ran into. This is a suburb of Vancouver. And they were struggling because they didn't have a downtown. They didn't have a place where they could throw parades, where they could get together for festivals. It was all parking lots and big box stores and strip malls in their center. So they invested in this big, elevated metro, high-frequency train, and they created new zoning for their downtown center that would allow major mixed-use towers. And then they waited for the development to come. And nothing happened. It was all just still parking lots and big box malls and strip malls, despite this huge investment they'd made. But then they came up in the early 2000s with a really brilliant plan to break through this problem. Because why this wasn't moving is that just like walkable development is self-reinforcing, car-oriented development is also self-reinforcing, right? So when everyone drives in a place, everyone wants to open up businesses that has big parking lots. And when everyone has big parking lots in front of their shops, no one wants to walk and everyone drives, which encourages people to do more of the same. So how do they break that cycle? So they decided to make 4 big investments. They'd build a new library, they'd build a new city hall, they would invest in a new campus for a local university, and they create a new mixed-use office building for government. And we know how this usually goes, right? So you put the library over here because there's some cheap land to build on, and then you put City Hall over there because there's a convenient piece of land they happen to own, and you locate the other investments in other places. But that's not what Surrey did. They said, no, we are going to put this tens of millions of dollars of investment in just 3 small city blocks. Put it all in one spot so that this street transformed into this, that's the new City Hall. This spot transformed into this new library. This spot transformed into this new government office building. And by combining all of that new investment and energy, they created a kind of critical mass. They broke the dam open. And suddenly, where they were getting 0 development applications before, suddenly they were getting 3, 4, 8 major developments. We're talking huge or multiple buildings, big towers. And so that in a 9-year period, they actually had 94 development applications all of a sudden, including this one, which is the most impactful. This is Surrey City Central. Just an expression of confidence in the future of that community, that this would become the kind of walkable place where you can keep businesses open on the ground floor because there will be so many people spending time there. So here's what we need to understand when we want to revitalize these main streets in North Dakota. The kind of problem we're addressing is a kind of critical mass problem. It's like a nuclear fission reaction. If you want to get a nuclear reaction going, you have to put a lot of energy at first in to get over a threshold. And once you hit that threshold, the reaction starts becoming self-sustaining, gets its own energy. And so the challenge is to get over that threshold. So that is lesson number 1. You have to create critical mass. Lesson number 2 is once you have critical mass, you have to cultivate it, to spread it out, to have it reach more places. So there's this researcher in Sweden, Todor Stojanovski, who was curious which parts of his city, Stockholm, actually has this kind of critical mass, this vibrant, wonderful places where businesses and street life and homes all interact to make each other more successful. And he found, unsurprisingly, that they're not just randomly spread out throughout the city, right? So the yellow on this map is where you find that kind of beautiful, active street life. And they all start from the red points, which are transit, and they spread out like an amoeba wrapping around the buildings. And that makes sense, right? Because when lots of people are walking in a place, some people walk a bit further, and then businesses open up to cater to those people who walk a bit further, and those businesses attract more people. So this street life grows outwards. So if you want to make more and more of your community successful, you have to cultivate street life in that way. Take Minot. I was going to pronounce this incorrectly, and I went ahead and did it. Help me out here. Minot. Being from Canada, I want to pronounce this as Minot. So, beautiful Main Street. Looks like a wonderful community. I wish I could go visit. And looking just briefly, I might be getting this a bit wrong, but it seems like this is, roughly speaking, where there's might be critical mass happening already in the center of that community. So the goal, the way we should think about this is to spread that critical mass out so that it reaches more and more city blocks. And we do that by replacing parking lots with great mixed-use buildings, by investing incrementally in places to sit, in great public spaces, by making sure that every single new building supports that kind of street life you're creating there. And critically, like in Surrey, whenever you build a big new investment, it should be contributing to this strategy of bringing more people to these streets. For example, in the city, they're building a $500 million new hospital campus. So this is huge. This is hundreds of new employees, thousands of clients every single year that could be coming to the central streets of that city to make those streets more lively and successful. And there's lots of space to put a potential hospital, so huge opportunity. Unfortunately, this is the downtown of the community, and this is where they're putting the hospital. So $500 million, of which precisely 0 pennies will contribute to the economic engine at the heart of the community. It won't create that kind of place where people want to be. It won't add to the lifeblood there. And so to attract companies to the downtown, the community might have to use tax breaks or other incentives to bring people there. Whereas if they had used that investment they're already making in the hospital, they could help create the kind of place that's so wonderful that people want to move their company there without needing a tax break. So that really needs to be our goal. So lesson number 2 is to cultivate critical mass and expand it outwards through the community with strategic investments. And then you have to make sure that every decision you make supports what you're doing there. Detroit used to be one of the most successful cities in the world, one of the most innovative, vibrant places. But they made some funny decisions. In the 1980s, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an elevated people mover, like in Surrey. But then they also spent tens and hundreds of millions of dollars on expanding roads entering the city so that every single person who wants to drive there can do so. And if people are driving there, they need to park, so they set really high parking requirements, which led lots of people to demolishing buildings in the downtown core and replacing them with parking lots. Until the point that almost half of Detroit is now occupied with parking. So the red is surface parking, the orange is structured parking. Half the city is gone. And yet it was still a highly congested place. Before the economic crash, it was one of the most congested cities in the United States and is still highly congested. They were not able to become the kind of suburban office park that people can drive to more or less efficiently, that everyone can drive to. And they no longer functioned as the kind of compact, vibrant community that people can easily walk, bike, and take transit. There was actually a study recently that showed that people living in Detroit, in the downtown, low-income people, struggle to get and keep jobs because the parking lots have created so much space between homes and the jobs that people struggle to get there. So Detroit spent hundreds of millions of dollars on undermining their own investments. They spent all that money on making their city less successful. So, do not do a Detroit. Decide, where are you going to build the kind of car-oriented design? And that could be 95, that could be 98% of the state. But decide, where are you designing a people-oriented, vibrant streetscape? And where you're doing that, do not apply the same kind of investments and standards in those places. You gotta make a clear line because they require entirely different things. In areas like the Main Street of Minot, you gotta get rid of all the standards that don't fit there, such as big off-street parking requirements, wide lane widths, large turning radii. You gotta get rid of all that stuff. It's just like when you're designing an airplane. Everything you put in an airplane has to support it flying, right? Everything you design on a main street needs to support it functioning as a main street. So the most useful tool for this is something called context classification. So just for the policy nerds out there, this is really how to get this done. More and more states in the United States, including Florida here, are classifying different kinds of places and saying, okay, here in this line, this is a town center context, and in that technical context, we use completely different standards. So that's just a really valuable tool for absolutely separating which standards we use where. So this is the single most important thing in my mind for creating successful main streets, not undermining ourselves with our own policy. So that's lesson 3. Explicitly decide what kind of place are you building where, and where you're building main streets, build them. Great main streets, they look wonderful. They just, it's palpable. You just know that this is a wonderful place you don't want to spend time. But what is it about them specifically that makes them so great? There's a lot that goes into it, but I want to highlight one thing. To figure this out, we actually teamed up with a neuroscientist named Colin Ellard, who strapped biometric sensors to people's arms that tested what level of stress they feel when walking through different environments to see what kind of places have what kinds of impacts on people. And funny enough, so this was all done in New York. This kind of jumbled up street that's a little bit chaotic, people actually felt really comfortable here. It's in part because there's a lot to look at. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot that's clearly intended for humans. So places to sit, doors to enter, windows to look through. The place where people felt the most stressed was a blank wall. This was Whole Foods. It was a window that was frosted over, so people have nothing to look at. Isn't that funny? That just a blank wall was actually physiologically experienced as stressful. And we know this from other research. Jan Gale has found that people actually walk faster when walking by a blank wall as if they're trying to escape. It's really an unpleasant environment. Streets, if you want to ruin a street, this is job number 1. Put blank walls up and it will drive people away in large numbers. And we know this from other research too. So in areas like the top here, where you have a mix of things to look at and little shops and services, people will walk upwards of 800 meters in that kind of environment. In a parking lot where there's nothing to look at, people won't walk 200 meters if they can avoid it. So the visual environment has a huge impact on us. But why does this matter so much? Well, it turns out that the human brain, our visual cortex, evolved to take in enormous amounts of complex visual information. Our brains are a little bit like a husky. Huskies were bred to do enormous amounts of exercise. So if you know anyone who owns one, they really have to be walked all the time because they need so much exercise just to feel comfortable. It's the same thing with our visual cortex. For it to feel comfortable, it needs to be environments like this where there's enormous amounts of complexity and information to take in. I mean, look at this beautiful main street. Look at all the details, all the texture in the bricks, everything on the ground, the flowers, the trees, just the amount that our brain can take in. And when people walk through this kind of environment, they're able to score better on tests afterwards. They have better attention. They feel better. It really profoundly affects us in every way. And so that's lesson number 4. That is not yet lesson number 4. We wanted to see, okay, if this has such a big impact on how much people walk, how else does it affect people's behavior? And so we had some people stand out in Seattle with maps to asking people for directions, pretending like they had no idea where they were. And we did this in 2 places as an experiment. One spot was in that kind of, active, vibrant place with lots to look at and patios. And the other was a spot with a blank wall. And we saw how much do people help these people out. The results blew our mind. Along the active street wall, people were 4 times more likely to stop and help a stranger. They were 3 times more likely to pull out their phone and help direct them to where to go. And my favorite, they were 4 times more likely to actually go out of their way to show someone where to go. I don't think this study would have worked in North Dakota because everyone would have shown them where to go. But at least in Seattle, the kind of place where you are has just a profound impact on how we feel and how we treat each other. So that is lesson number 4. Humans don't just see a street, they feel it. If we want to design communities that succeed economically, that attract and keep talent, we need to treat this as seriously as we treat, building fire-safe buildings and buildings that don't fall over. It's just as fundamental. We need to design streets that people love, that meet what the science says humans need to feel comfortable. And then the 5th lesson is really simple. If you get people walking on a street, maximize the impact they have on that street by giving them reasons to stay. So if someone walks along a block and just keeps on walking, it takes about 60 seconds for them to walk through the block, depending on how long it is. If they stop and sit for half an hour, that means they have a 30 times bigger impact on creating critical mass for that street. So job number 1, when you're bringing people to a main street, if they're there, you want to give them reasons to stay because that multiplies the impact that they have on creating that vibrant place you want to have. So in Halifax, what we do is we have a specific person who works for the Waterfront Corporation whose job it is to make small investments every single year in creating these hammocks. These are wildly popular. Everyone wants to sit on them. Or they replaced the parking lot with little shops, just a little bit of paint and picnic tables, and this is one of the most bumping places in Halifax. So create programs to implement small, incremental investments to give people a reason to hang out on a street every time they go there. And that's what multiplies the impact and creates these successful places. So what we're talking about today is cultivation. We're talking about creating the conditions to germinate a seed and then to keep providing what that seed needs to keep growing bigger and bigger so that more and more of our communities can become these wonderful places that people will move across the country to get a chance to live in. And we have just come up on time here. This is an obnoxious photo of me on vacation. I wanted to make the point that there's this great opportunity today that people can live and work anywhere. So why don't you create workcation destinations, workcation resorts in your main streets where people can come from around the world and get to do their work from away with this kind of natural beauty, this kind of cute main streets, and use the fact that people can work from anywhere to help drive the economic growth of North Dakota, because I think there's a lot of people in tech and knowledge industries who would love to just escape the cities, the congested cities where they work for just a few months to get to do their work somewhere so beautiful and friendly as North Dakota. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and just say you have such great bones in so many of your historic communities. Use that as a starting place so that you can create communities that people from around the world will want to live in, that people want to go on road trips to get to see all these amazing centers. You got the fundamentals already. Cultivate it. Build it up into something truly wonderful and beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Awesome.